I was standing in the driveway holding my youngest grandson, and my right leg simply gave out. I did not drop him, but that 1 second of sheer terror changed my life. And if you listen to what I'm about to tell you, I promise you will never have to feel that exact same fear. It was a Tuesday afternoon. The driveway was completely dry. I had not tripped over the garden hose. I had not slipped on a patch of oil. I was just standing there, shifting my weight to adjust the 30 pounds of a laughing 3-year-old in my arms, and the muscle in my right thigh just refused to hold us up. The leg buckled inward. I managed to twist my body and throw my left shoulder hard against the side panel of my pickup truck to stop us from hitting the concrete. My grandson thought it was a game. He giggled and grabbed my collar, but my heart was hammering against my ribs so hard I could hear it in my ears. I carefully carried him inside, set him down on the living room rug with his toys, and went to sit in my armchair. I stared out the front window for a long time. That was the exact moment the heavy blanket of denial was pulled off me. I realized that the midnight leg cramps I had been fighting off for months, and the quiet, heavy weakness I felt every time I climbed the wooden stairs in the hallway were not just passing aches. My foundation was crumbling right out from under me, and I was terrified. I spent 33 years working on the concrete floors of a distribution warehouse right here in Knoxville, Tennessee. For over 3 decades, my legs were the primary engines of my entire life. I walked miles every single shift. I climbed up and down the steep, grated metal stairs of the loading docks. I pushed heavy steel carts loaded with freight. I lifted, I squatted, I pivoted, and I never once thought about the muscles doing the work. You do not think about your legs when you are younger. You just expect them to be there. You treat them like a pair of heavy-duty shock absorbers that will last forever. But when I retired, the constant heavy movement stopped and the quiet deterioration started. It crept in so slowly I barely noticed it at first. I started waking up at 3 in the morning with my calf muscle locked up so tight it felt like a twisted steel cable that was about to snap under the tension. The pain was so violent I would have to bite the inside of my cheek to keep from shouting. The next day, that leg would feel like it had been beaten with a wooden mallet. Then came the thinning. I would pull on my favorite pair of work jeans and notice the denim hanging loose around my thighs. I would go to stand up from a deep couch and instinctively reach out to push off the armrests, a movement I had never relied on before in my life. I was losing the ground beneath my feet, inch by inch. I did not want to admit it to anyone. Most men from my generation are built the same stubborn way. We would rather swallow broken glass than look someone in the eye and admit our bodies are losing their strength. We just push through the pain, ignore the hesitation in our step, and pretend everything is perfectly fine until the day something completely gives out, and we end up staring at the ceiling of a hospital room. I was heading straight down that path of pride and silence. But my daughter Megan catches everything. She is an occupational therapist. She spends her entire week working with older folks who have lost their mobility. Folks who ignored the exact same warning signs I was having until they took a bad fall and lost their independence entirely. She came over for dinner the Sunday after the incident in the driveway. I tried to walk normally, but I had a lingering soreness from a bad cramp the night before, and I was favoring my left side. She pulled out a dining chair, sat me down, and looked right at me. She did not lecture me. She just told me what she sees at her clinic every single day. She explained that night cramps and sudden weakness in older adults are not just a lack of water or a sign to rest more. She told me it is often the direct result of the body stripping the muscles of their nutrients, causing the fibers to shrink, and the electrical nerve signals to misfire constantly. She opened her bag and pulled out a stack of papers. It was a study she had been reviewing for her patients. It tracked a large group of senior men and women over a 10-year period. The numbers on that page burned themselves into my memory. The study proved that without deliberate, targeted intervention, Folks our age can lose up to 3 to 5% of their total muscle mass every single decade after 60. And the very first place that structural loss shows up is in the balance, the power, and the electrical signaling of the lower legs. The cramps were not the actual disease. The cramps were the alarm bell ringing in the dark, desperately trying to tell me that my muscles were starving, that my mineral balance was completely broken, and that my nerves were misfiring because they simply did not have the raw materials they needed to function anymore. Sitting there at the table, looking at those numbers and thinking about how close I came to dropping my grandson on the concrete, I felt a cold wave of realization wash over me. I realized that if I could somehow go back in time 13 years, back to the exact day I turned 60, I would change everything about how I maintain the engine of my body. I would not just accept the cramps as the price of admission for getting older. I would have built a defense, so I decided to build that defense right then and there. I started reading. I started asking questions. I started looking at the exact mechanics of how an aging muscle operates and what it needs to survive. After months of trial, error, and paying very close attention to how my body responded, I tracked down a specific list of 7 vitamins and minerals that completely changed the landscape of my lower body. I realized my legs were starving for these exact 7 building blocks. I am going to walk you through all 7 of them right now. I will tell you exactly what they do and why your legs are begging for them. And I need you to pay very close attention to the 7th item on this list. It is something almost no one associates with leg strength, but it was the exact key that finally removed the heavy, dead feeling of exhaustion from my thighs. Let us start with the first thing I would have taken the day I turned 60. For my entire life, I believed that because I worked out in the yard and drank milk when I was younger, my bones and muscles had all the structural support they needed. I thought sunlight hitting my arms while I mowed the lawn was enough. But as we age, our skin becomes incredibly inefficient at converting sunlight into usable vitamins. My daughter Megan explained to me that without a massive, consistent source of vitamin D3, your body physically cannot absorb the calcium required to make a muscle contract with any kind of power. Vitamin D3 is the gatekeeper. You can eat all the healthy food in the world, but without D3, the gate stays locked and the nutrients pass right through you. I read a piece of clinical observation she gave me showing that seniors who suffered from severe lower body weakness and frequent falls almost universally had completely depleted D3 levels in their blood. The muscle fibers simply did not have the spark they needed to ignite. I shared this with an old buddy of mine from the warehouse named Arthur. Arthur is 68 years old, spent 20 years driving a forklift, and he was complaining to me over coffee that his legs felt like they were moving through thick mud every single morning. He said it took him 20 minutes just to feel steady enough to walk down his driveway to get the newspaper. I told him about the D3 deficiency. I told him his gate was locked. He went out and got a high-quality D3 supplement and started taking it every morning with his eggs. It took about 2 months, but we were standing in the parking lot of the hardware store when he told me the morning heaviness was completely gone. He said he was waking up and his legs felt ready to move immediately. He finally gave his engine the spark it was missing. The second thing I would have started taking at 60 is the exact right kind of magnesium. This is where I made a massive mistake for years. Whenever I complained about waking up with violent night cramps, folks would always tell me to just take some magnesium. So I went to the pharmacy and bought the biggest, cheapest bottle of magnesium oxide I could find. I took it every night. It did absolutely nothing for my legs, and it only served to upset my stomach. What I did not know, and what nobody ever bothers to explain, is that cheap magnesium oxide passes right through your digestive tract. It never actually crosses over into your muscle tissue. I had to learn the hard way to switch to magnesium glycinate. Magnesium is the literal electrical switch in your body that tells a locked, cramping calf muscle to finally relax and let go. When you are deficient, that switch gets stuck in the on position, the nerve keeps firing aggressively, and you end up standing on the cold floor in agony. I found a piece of research tracking older adults with chronic sleep disruption due to muscle spasms. The group that used highly absorbable magnesium glycinate saw a reduction in night cramps of over 70% in just 4 weeks. I bought a bottle of it and gave it to my neighbor Henry. Henry is 75. He loves his vegetable garden more than anything, but he was losing sleep every single night from violent toe and calf cramps that would leave him limping the whole next day. He started taking the glycinate about an hour before his dinner. A week and a half later, I was out washing my truck when he walked over to the fence. The dark circles under his eyes were gone. He grabbed the top of the chain link and told me he had slept for 8 unbroken hours for the first time in a decade. The electrical storm in his legs had finally been grounded. The switch was finally turning off. That brings me to the third vital piece of this puzzle, and this one is the traffic cop of your entire body. Vitamin K2. I spent my whole life thinking that if you just take calcium and drink your milk, your bones stay strong and your legs stay solid. I was completely wrong. What I learned is that if you take calcium, or if you take that vitamin D3 we just talked about, without also taking vitamin K2, that calcium does not know where to go. It gets lost. Instead of going into the deep bone tissue where your leg muscles anchor themselves, that calcium settles into your arteries and stiffens up the soft tissue in your joints. It literally calcifies your knees and ankles, making them stiff, grinding, and painful. I read a fascinating paper looking at hundreds of seniors proving that K2 is the mechanism that physically directs the minerals out of the soft tissue and forces them into the structural foundation where they belong. My son Derek runs a commercial HVAC business here in town. He employs a lot of guys my age who have been crawling around in tight spaces and hauling heavy compressors for 30 years. One of his senior technicians is a guy named Carl, who is 66. Carl was getting to the point where his knees were so stiff and rigid in the mornings that he had to pull himself up a flight of stairs using both hands on the handrail. Derek knew I had been reading about all of this, so he told Carl what I learned about K2 clearing out the joint stiffness and putting the calcium back in the bones. Carl was desperate enough to try it. He added it to his morning routine. It was not a fast fix, but about 3 months later, Carl sat down with my son in the break room and told him the grinding feeling in his knees was fading away. He said his legs felt solid under him again rather than feeling like rusty hinges. He put the traffic cop back on duty. The fourth thing I would absolutely go back and take is vitamin B12. As we age, something happens in our stomachs that we rarely notice. We produce less stomach acid. On top of that, men my age eat antacid pills like they are candy after every spicy meal. What I did not realize was that by lowering my stomach acid, I was completely destroying my body's ability to pull B12 out of the meat and food I was eating. B12 is crucial because it creates the myelin sheath. Think of the myelin sheath as the thick rubber electrical tape wrapped around the wires in your house. It protects the nerves running all the way down your spine and into your feet. Without enough B12, that insulation frays and wears thin. When that happens, the signal from your brain to your feet gets delayed by just a fraction of a second. That tiny delay is why we stumble on a flat rug. That is why we hesitate before stepping off a curb. The electrical signal is short-circuiting before it reaches the muscle. Megan showed me a clinical observation of older patients who were convinced they were losing their balance due to irreversible old age. But their blood work showed their nerves were just starving for B12. My wife, Linda, is the one who noticed this in me. We were walking out to the mailbox one afternoon, and she pointed out that I was dragging the toe of my right foot just slightly across the concrete. I could not even feel myself doing it. It terrified her. I went and found a sublingual B12, the kind that dissolves directly under your tongue so it completely bypasses the stomach and goes straight into the bloodstream. I started taking it every morning. Within a few weeks, that slight drag disappeared. I was picking my feet up squarely again. The nerve signal was moving fast and clear, all because I fixed the insulation on the wire. The fifth piece of the foundation is potassium. For the longest time, I thought if I ate a banana every Sunday morning, I was covered for the week. But a banana barely scratches the surface of what an aging, working muscle needs to stay hydrated and powerful. A few years ago, I fell into the trap of eating a strict low-carbohydrate diet because every magazine and television program said it was the only way for older folks to stay healthy. I pushed the potatoes off my plate and tried to live on lean meat and salads. By doing that, I was draining massive amounts of water and potassium right out of my muscle cells. Potassium is the mineral that balances the fluid inside the muscle belly. Without it, your muscles dry up from the inside out. They become tight, brittle, and incredibly prone to violent spasms the second you put any real pressure on them. I found a study tracking older adults who deliberately increased their daily potassium intake from whole food and targeted sources. The results showed a massive reduction in exercise-induced fatigue and cramping. I realized my legs were just dehydrated of minerals. I started eating baked sweet potatoes with the skin entirely on, which are loaded with natural potassium, and I made sure my daily vitamin intake supported that mineral balance. I shared this realization with an old friend from our church named Thomas. Thomas is 71, and he had completely given up his evening walks because his thighs would start burning and shaking after just 10 minutes on the pavement. He thought his walking days were over. I sat with him in the pew after service and told him his legs were just starving for fluid balance. I told him to fix his potassium. He listened. A month later, I was driving past the neighborhood park and I saw Thomas walking the full 2-mile loop, his stride steady as a train. He was not shaking anymore because his muscles finally had the hydration they needed to contract and release smoothly. The sixth thing I would have started taking at 60 is vitamin B6. Almost nobody talks about this one when it comes to leg strength, and it is a massive oversight. We spend all this time trying to eat enough protein to save our shrinking muscles. We eat chicken, we eat eggs, we try to do the right thing. But as we get older, our bodies slowly forget how to physically break that protein down into the individual amino acids that actually repair the torn leg tissue. Think of vitamin B6 as the mechanic in the garage. You can deliver all the parts you want to the garage, but if the mechanic is not there to put them together, nothing gets fixed. Without B6, you are just eating expensive meat and getting no stronger. I read about a controlled trial where seniors who supplemented their diet with B6 saw a measurable, significant improvement in protein synthesis compared to those who did not. My wife Linda is a perfect example of this. She used to complain that no matter how well she ate, her legs still felt hollow and weak when she stood up from the sofa after watching a movie. She felt like she had no driving force in her quads. I started making sure we both got a solid, reliable dose of B6 every single day to act as that mechanic. The change in Linda was quiet, but it was profound. I watched her stand up from that same sofa a few weeks later, and she did not use the armrests at all. She just planted her feet and rose up in one fluid motion. The food she was eating was finally turning into actual, usable muscle tissue again. I have given you 6 pieces of this puzzle so far. If you just fix the electrical shorts with the right magnesium, protect your nerve signals with the B12, and direct the calcium into your bones with the K2, you are going to feel a difference in your lower body that will make you wish you had started 10 years ago. You will sleep better, you will walk steadier, and you will trust your balance more. But none of those 6 things will completely remove the deep, heavy, dead exhaustion that settles into your thighs after a long day if you are missing this final piece. The 7th thing I would take, the thing that finally gave me my physical stamina back, is vitamin E. I spent my entire life thinking vitamin E was just an ingredient women looked for in expensive skin creams. I never once considered putting it inside my body for my muscles. But inside your system, vitamin E is the ultimate rust remover. Every time you walk, every time you climb a stair, every time you use your legs to stand up, your muscles burn fuel and create metabolic waste. They create internal rust. When you are 20 years old, your blood flow is so powerful it washes that rust away instantly. But when you are in your 70s, your circulation slows down. They felt clean. The constant looming threat of a cramp hovering just behind my knee was entirely erased. The quiet weakness that used to make me second guess whether I should carry a heavy box of tools out of the garage was replaced by a solid, quiet trust in my own body. I did not feel like a man trying to helplessly manage his own decline anymore. I felt like a man who had finally read the operator's manual for a heavy machine he had been driving blind for years. If you're sitting there right now and you know exactly what that heavy, quiet weakness in your thighs feels like when you try to stand up, or if you know the sheer panic of feeling your leg give out for just a split second when you're carrying something important, I want you to hear me clearly. You do not have to just accept the decline. Your body is not failing you out of spite or punishment. It is just crying out for the raw materials it desperately needs to run an older engine. Do not try to fix everything by tomorrow morning. That never works. Just pick one thing. Start with the highly absorbable magnesium glycinate before bed to turn off the electrical storms in your calves. Or start taking the D3 and K2 tomorrow morning to get the calcium out of your stiff joints and back into your bones where it belongs. Give your foundation a fighting chance. The absolute, unavoidable truth of getting older is this: your independence begins and ends with the strength of your legs. If your legs go, your freedom goes right along with them. Do not wait until you have a terrifying scare in your own driveway to start taking this seriously. Protect what you have left and rebuild what you thought you had lost forever. I am going to head out to the backyard now. The grandkids are coming over in an hour, and I have a serious game of tag I need to prepare for. I appreciate you sitting here and spending this time with me. Take care of yourself, start making these changes today, and I will be right here when you are ready to talk again.